All right, it being 6 p.m, I'll declare open the ordinary meeting of the Shire of Capel Council. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wadani people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today, and those who will follow in their footsteps. Record of attendance, we have 6 councillors in the chamber tonight. Councillor Noonan is attending via teleconference. Councillor Peter McCleary has a leave of absence. Under Regulation 14C 2B of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, as per the amended Regulations 2022, I have authorised Councillor Kieran Noonan to attend this ordinary meeting of the Council for June 2023 via teleconference. As per Regulation 14C5, I have taken into consideration the advice provided by Councillor Noonan that he will attend the meeting from a location where confidentiality can be maintained, and I consider it acceptable. A member who attends a meeting under Regulation 14C2 by electronic means is determined under Sub-Regulation 2 is taken to be in attendance and present at the meeting for the purposes of the Act and these regulations, while the member is in contact by those electronic means with each other member present at the meeting. Probably also just like to begin this evening on a little bit of a sad note. In the last month there have been a few birthdays, and so our Deputy President no longer qualifies for the youth demographic. So we no longer have a member of our youth on council, so thanks for the reminder. On that little nutshell, we'll move along. Response to previous public questions taken on notice, we had some questions from Ms Bronwyn Mutton and Mr Kevin Napton. Those responses to those questions have been provided in the minutes. We now move to public question time. I have a few on notice. The first from Mr Bob Horsfell of Boynup.
Good evening. At the last council meeting, I spoke about the sand extraction at 148 Skippings Road, Boynup. An extraction that extended to 106 metres from my home. 2 weeks later, I'm advised by council that a sand extraction permit at 141 Bells Road, Boynup, which is on the other side of Brookdale Road, leaving Brookdale Road residents surrounded on both sides by sand mines. As Brookdale Road is on a high wind plain, residents will be subjected to dust no matter which direction the wind is blowing. The residents of Boynup are concerned about the serious long-term health of their families should these mines be approved. The sand is desirable for fracking and other uses due to its size, shape and crystalline silica properties, and because the deposits are usually close to the surface and easy to mine. An increase in the number of new requests for mining and processing plant permits has led to several communities raising a question about the possibility of respirable crystalline silica to be generated at mine sites, and how silica might impact the health of nearby residents. Dust can be made up of visible and microscopic particles. Particulate matter is defined as airborne material that is smaller than 100 microns. For comparison, human hair is typically between 70 to 100 microns in diameter. The size of the matter affects how long the particles can stay airborne and how far the particles can travel before settling out onto surfaces. Smaller particles stay airborne longer and then can travel further than larger particles. Respirable crystalline silica refers to particles of crystalline silica less than 4 microns in size or particular matter. MP4-sized particles can penetrate deep into the lungs, where the most critical effects of silicosis and cancer are thought to occur. In other words, it's just the dust you can't see that can take you out. There are many reports about this hazard worldwide. So the question is, will the councillors please request the Shire to urgently seek independent core samples to show the percentage of silica over the proposed site before progressing with this application? If not, why not? Second question is, will the council also request the Shire to obtain an independent analysis of EIL sites for all existing and future applications, and for those results to be made public? So far, we have not been given any information at all on the content of this mining. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horsfeld, for your questions, and thank you for submitting them with us before the meeting so we can provide you a response. I suppose to your first question, I'll ask the CEO to respond, but to your second question, I can answer that the Shire requires that all existing extractive industries to operate in accordance with their approvals. If a health concern is raised regarding an existing operation, Shire staff will investigate the matter and seek direction and guidance from the relevant state government agencies that regulate those sorts of matters. Regarding any new applications, the Shire will be guided by advice received from the state government agencies as part of the assessment process and in addition to our own development requirements. This is to ensure appropriate information is provided and best practice outcomes are achieved in line with legislation as part of the approvals process. Now I'll ask the CEO to respond to your first question.
Yeah, unfortunately, the residents are not advised of what's being mined on the other side of the fence. The residents are not aware of what is being mined.
As part of an extractive industry licence application, they put in there what the main product they are trying to extract out of that area. And I do believe that is reported to the local government as part of their assessment criteria.
But it's not reported to the residents. The residents are basing their response on the information they're given, but they're not given the information on what is being mined.
All the documents that the Shire received or receives as part of a development application are then publicly advertised. All those exact same documents are then on the Shire's website for public inspection during the public consultation period.
Thanks for that.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. Thank you, Mr. Horsfeld, for the question. As ultimately the JDAP will be the deciding body in relation to this extractive industry application, with the Shire providing a responsible authority report. The Shire is seeking expert advice from the Department of Health regarding respiral crystalline silica in relation to this proposal. The Shire will rely on this guidance in finalising our responsible authority report to the JDAP. The Shire's responsible authority report will be publicly available when the application is listed in the JDAP agenda. The JDAP may wish to request independent sampling as part of their decision-making process on the proposal.
That's all the questions I have on notice. Are there any questions from the floor? No? We'll move on to section 5, applications for leave of absence. Is there any? No. Declarations of interest. I've received none. There are no items for discussion behind closed doors, so we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. 8.1, the Ordinary Council meeting of the 31st of May. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Any discussion on those minutes? No. I'll put them to the vote. Those in favour? Those minutes carried. Oh, sorry. Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the minutes?
For.
Those minutes are carried unanimous. 8.2, the special council meeting of the 14th of June 2023. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terentroy. Is there any discussion on those minutes? No. I'll put them to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Those minutes are carried unanimous. Announcements by the presiding member without discussion. There's just a couple in relation to item 13.1, Chief Executive Officer Performance and Remuneration Policy. There is an updated officer's recommendation to that with 3 changes. The first change is to 1.2, in that the panel must comprise of up to 5 members. The addition of a 1.8, that members of the review panel may access WALGA CEO performance review training or similar as required, and a change to 2.1, in that the panel will coordinate with the Shire about the engaged external facilitator. And there's also an updated officer's alternate recommendation to item 14.5, Delegations Review 2023, the addition of a third point to endorse the new delegation 1.2.33 fauna release as presented in the late attachment 15.4.2. All right. There are no petitions, deputations or presentations, and we have no motions of which previous notice is given, and we have no questions of which previous notice has been given. We now move on to Chief Executive Officer reports. 13.1, Chief Executive Officer Performance and Remuneration Review Policy. As I just mentioned, there is an updated officer's recommendation for that one. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terrentroy. Councillor Andrew. Sure. Were there any differs? Do you have the change, Councillor? Oh. Does the minute taker have a copy of the changes? Oh, okay. We'll wait for them to get on the board. And you can just highlight the individual changes. Yep. Were there any further changes? Sorry, Councillor, we'll just let the minute taker. Is 1.8 coming out of your recommendation, Councillor, as it's included in your new 1.7? Councillor Andrew, do you just want to step through your amendment one by one again, please? Sorry, just start at the beginning. Yep. 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 Sorry, Councillor. I'll just get you to step through it before you speak to the item. Okay. Does the seconder still agree with that? Well, it's being moved as the primary motion, so you're still happy to remain the seconder? Yep, all right. Councillor Andrew.
So I've read many CEO review policies over the last week.
Sorry, your microphone, Councillor.
Thank you. I've read many a CEO review policy over the last week. We were the only one that gave the option for in-house human resources to be involved in the review process. And I think that being allowed, I don't think that that should be permitted. I think that the assistants and the person that's assisting the committee with the CEO's review should be completely independent. I don't think it should be someone in-house that has a pre-existing relationship to the council and to the CEO. I think that the CEO review panel members should have to undergo some sort of training. I think that this is probably, while all of our committees are important, I think this is one that's very important. And I think that you should have to undergo the WELGA training to be a part of it. And then obviously 2.1 just sets out the requirements and the scope for the independent consultant, and limits the what's the word? Limits the input from council employees to just those that are obviously partaking in the 360 review and those sorts of things, rather than actually being involved in the actual process at the committee level themselves.
Councillor Tarrant Troy.
Although initially I was a little surprised about the changes, sitting here and thinking about them, if we're all for transparency of processes, it actually makes sense. These changes make a lot of sense. It also removes a responsibility from staff to feel it doesn't affect staff's integrity, where there is the not that I'm saying that this happens, but this makes it far more transparent, keeps staff not involved in the process except for submitting their submissions through the 360, which staff members are allowed to do and every councillor is allowed to do. So I think these are good amendments. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the alternative recommendation? Speakers for? The Deputy President.
Can I just begin with a question?
Yes.
Clause 1.8, was that removed? Was that intended to have been removed? Because I just note that it hasn't been removed in the... Okay, no worries. Just because that was related to the optional CEO performance review training. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with the intent of Councillor Andrew in regards to, I think, the motivations behind ensuring a transparent process that in many ways can avoid any conflict of interest. I think, interestingly though, in my experience in the CEO's performance reviews, the best one we've ever had was for, well, the best process from my experience was one for when Paul Sheedy was CEO, and that was one that we managed internally. The process was quite smooth. I think, it's my belief anyway, I think the reason why the option has been introduced for the committee was because I think we've had a couple of poor performing in private independent facilitators, quite frankly. I don't think the process has been particularly smooth. I don't think it's worked well from that perspective the last couple of times. Now, there was other options out there, of course, but I think that may have been why the option was there for the panel to decide. 100% would never argue against mandating some training for such a role, because I think Councillor Andrew is correct. It's a very important committee, and having been on the committee since the last round of elections and nominations to that committee, you know, it's our only employee at the end of the day as a CEO. So we have to ensure that we have transparent and as fail-proof as possible accountable processes in place. So I can 100% see where Councillor Andrew is coming from. I don't necessarily have any objections to the changes. I just think there was some, I can sympathise with the thinking behind some of the original clauses around the facilitator, but I mean, not overly concerned. I think it will just be something we have to manage when the panel assigns a facilitator. And maybe a question, there was an amendment in there about administrative support being limited only to agendas and minutes. I would have thought that potentially we would need administrative support in actually procuring the facilitator, because I mean we can't sign the cheque, and we also can't, if we have to obtain the quotes or go to any sort of tender. I don't think we'll hopefully be hitting those sort of thresholds, but maybe if I can ask for some clarity around if there's any restrictions administratively in actually procuring the facilitator.
So the committee and the council can't actually engage a consultant. It needs to go to tender and it can reward it, but the engagement needs to happen at an administrative level. There are also some other administrative functions that are required in the middle, in the 6 monthly review that is conducted in-house, because it's just an update, a check, so that is done in-house. It would probably be read at the moment that an external facilitator wouldn't be needed then for that function. But there are other aspects that administrative support, as the current president and chair of the review panel, there are administrative support that is required from the administration separate to the review process, in addition to agendas and minutes.
Can I ask then, just if we could scroll down a little bit to where those clauses were, given that I know councillors obviously don't have a hard copy of this alternative recommendation. If I can just get my head around the exact phrasing of the administrative council will not be involved in the CEO's performance review except as requested by the council to prepare agendas and take minutes. So I guess if I had any concern, it would probably be around how restrictive the amended clause 2.6 is. And again, I completely understand the intents of Councillor Andrew, but I think there is administrative requirements in the procurement and in the six monthly performance review that would be challenging if 2.6 was to remain the way it was. And just reviewing the original clause, well, there was no. So there was no original 2.6, and then the mention of administrative support, I understand, is from memory, is removed in the original item 1.7. Can I perhaps move an amendment?
Yes.
So my amendment is to perhaps to reintroduce point 1.7 and subsequently make 1.7 1.8. And the review panel chair will coordinate the review process and will coordinate the review process with the independent facilitator and seek administrative support as required. So I won't speak to it. But
No, so that's your amendment up on the board.
so
Sorry, hang on, just. So that would become a new 1.8, sorry.
oh, that would become a new 1.7, and then we'd bump 1.7 down to 1.8.
Okay. Is that your amendment on the board, councillor?
So it will be the review panel chair and independent facilitator will coordinate the review process and seek administrative support as required.
You just got it twice there. All right, so that's it up on the board.
Coordinate the review process and seek administrative. Can't have an open discussion about the wording of the amendment, so I might have to
Not until it's
stick
seconded,
with,
councillor.
stick- Vic-
Yeah, it
The training becomes
follows.
1.8.
Is that your amendment, councillor?
Yep, that's my
Right.
amendment.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Dillon,
Um,
councillor Sciano.
yeah, so wanting to keep the intent of Councillor Andrew of the fact that the independent facilitator will facilitate the review with the review panel chair, but obviously need to ensuring that we're not too restrictive with the administrative support. I think we can establish that obviously procuring the independent facilitator, paying the bills, and other things will require administrative support above the agenda and minute taking. My only criticism probably remains about it doesn't necessarily address the 6 monthly review. Without introducing another exclusion clause of some sort, I'm just, I guess, focused with this amendment at the moment on allowing the administrative support to, as required. So, yeah, that's the amendment for the time being.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Firstly, may I congratulate Councillor Andrew on the spirit of her amendments, but I am of a like mind of our Deputy President in terms of not being too limiting on the administrative support. I'm glad to see agendas and minutes sort of get to a more broad sort of administrative support on that level, so that's why I'm happy to second Councillor Sciano on his amendment. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the amendment? Speakers for? Does the mover wish to close?
Just that when we finish with the amendment, I'll continue speaking on the substantive motion if I am still in the speaking order.
Yep. All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that's carried 6-1. The Deputy President.
Yeah, so now moving on with the substantive motion with the amendment, if I could just continue down to the amendment clause that actually specifically mentions the agenda and minutes. I feel like we're in consideration in detail, clause by clause. Yeah, 2.6. So having added clause 1.7 in, it still doesn't address 2.6. 2.6 still has the does in fact actually still have the restriction in there. So I don't believe I can move another amendment, so I will have to I'll actually close my opportunity to speak, I think.
All right, look, I might take the opportunity here to speak. I'm getting the sense from the council that there's a bit of fleshing out they're wanting to do on this policy. So what I'm actually going to suggest is actually, first thing I'll do is I'll foreshadow the original updated officer's recommendation. What I'm actually going to suggest we do is we vote this policy down as moved by Councillor Andrew. I'm not saying whether I'm for or against it at this point. So that we go to the foreshadowed officer's recommendation. It's a clean slate back to what was originally provided to us. And then we defer this for council to have a bit more discussion with officers around this. And then when it comes back, we can then amend off the clean one rather than trying to either put things back in or take away some of the amendments that have been made by Councillor Andrew. I think that would be the best way to proceed. So that's my advice where the councillor takes it. So I've foreshadowed the original motion. So if this alternative recommendation as moved is lost, we would move back to this immediately, and then I would move for an immediate deferral for further workshopping on that policy so we can get it right. Otherwise we could be here probably for a few hours back and forth in some of these clauses. All right? Okay, and while I'm still exercising my right to speak, I do have concerns around just some of those clauses regarding engaging the consultant. Yeah, I'm not sure some of those are operable, so I think we need to get a bit more advice on that. I think there's a little bit of conflicting opinion, so that's why I think we don't make a decision, as in we don't approve this, because then we'd, you know, if we vote against it and defer, we've at least still got the current policy in place we can operate. Because as you know, we are moving into the next cycle. So I think, yeah, we proceed as I suggested. I foreshadowed it. We vote this alternative down. We move back to this, and then we defer, and then we can have a discussion about it and make the changes in a bit more structured manner. All right. So that's me. I foreshadowed. Right. Are there any other speakers to the alternative recommendation? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the alternative recommendation? Councillor Noonan, are you still online?
Yes.
Are you
Against.
against? All right. That alternative recommendation is lost unanimous. We now move to the foreshadowed recommendation as moved by myself. Is there a seconder to it to get on the table? Councillor Tarantroy. As the mover, I'll move clause, standing order, sorry, 12.1A, that the motion be deferred until, take the advice of the CEO, until I'll move, 12.1A, the motion be deferred until the July Ordinary Council meeting following a workshop discussion. All right. Yeah, okay. That's been seconded. As only the mover can speak to that. I think I've made my reasons pretty clear. So I'll put that deferral to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the deferral?
For.
And that is carried unanimous. All right, we now move to Infrastructure and Development Reports 14.1, Shire of Capel Draft Sustainability Framework 2023 to 2027. Is there a mover for that item? The Deputy President. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. The Deputy President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. It's quite timely considering I remember when I was in your chair last month, I got a question on this exact topic and what the Shire would be doing to address sustainability and climate change through policy and through framework. And of course, we made a declaration some years ago, but the sustainability framework is actually presented in front of us for consideration tonight. I mean, one of the things that stands out to me is a desire for sustainable annual progress reporting. I think, you know, we obviously have the committee, the Climate Change Adaptation and Sustainability Committee. Proud to have been a part of that committee for quite a number of terms now. I see a lot of what's happened through those conversations come out in this framework. There are a number of targets in there, self-imposed within the organisation, which I think is an important part of this as well, about the organisation and not necessarily about trying to legislate or policy rules outside of our own organisation. But yeah, I think it's quite a good framework. I think it's definitely we use the term low-hanging fruit a lot, and I think there was definitely it's how much of a changing world, and particularly this space is, because I think when 8 years ago when I came onto council, we had addressed the low-hanging fruit at the time between lights and solar panels here and there, but you know, things change. There's a lot more low-hanging fruit now to address. There's definitely some targets in there, some ambitious targets, and some ambitious projects as well to see come through the annual budget and the corporate business plan. But yeah, obviously commend the report to council.
Councillor Dillon. Are there any speakers for or against the item? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that's carried 6-1. Item 14.2, RFT, request for tender 23-05, tree management services. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sciano, is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. The Deputy President.
No, thank you. I'll just move that as read.
Councillor Mogg? No. Is there any discussion on that item? No, nothing further from the mover. I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. 14.3, extractive industry, removal of stockpile and rehabilitation, lot 828, Yates Road, Capel River. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Dillon. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terrantroy. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to outline a bit about this item, it is basically no longer an active extractive industry site. It is removing a stockpile of existing product and just looking at the future rehabilitation of said lot. I'm happy with the item as presented. I will thank our officers for organising a bit of a site visit, which I couldn't attend, but I know a couple of our councillors did. But I'm pretty happy with the item as presented here because, business is basically over. It's just removing an existing stockpile, and I'd like to see the proponent be able to do that relatively unhindered. Thank you.
Councillor Tarantroy.
I reserve my right.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? No speakers? Councillor Dillon? Nothing further. I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. Item 14.4, Local Planning Policy 6.2, Extractive Industries, Consideration of Submissions and Final Adoption. Is there a mover for that item? I'll move it. I'll have a crack. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. All right. This is great to see this policy come back to us today. This is something that I think's been in the works for a very long time and has certainly generated a lot of discussion and a lot of input, not only from the community but from the industry representatives which have the pleasure of operating in our beautiful district. And I think it's certainly generated quite a few points that we've been able to flesh out and work out how can we keep the industry operating, but ensure that the sites that are left behind are sustainable for the future. So I think it's very important to point out that the Shire of Capel, in addition to probably the rest of the region, does recognise the strategic importance of our basic raw materials and the economic contribution they make to the region and jobs throughout the southwest. This policy establishes a Shire position which I think is sustainable and conducive going forward. I think it's not pro-development, but it's certainly not anti-development. It is about sustainable development and ensuring that applications that come through the Shire are done in a sustainable way in suitable locations with management and rehabilitation standards that are up to date and contemporary in their standards. So I think what the main thing the council has listened to and the Shire has listened to is the disruption and the amenity impacts in the environment and the surrounding community that some of these industries can have. And as we've been seeing, a lot of our cleared sites are largely reaching depletion, and we're seeing more and more extractive industries, and we will in the future move into areas that are still either part of remnant bushland or in more sensitive areas. So I think it's very important that the Shire has kept its framework up to date and has done that in consultation with the industry. So, you know, I think what we've come up with is a good set of standards, and we've already seen some applications come through where some of these new standards have been applied. We've got a fee structure which is relevant and adjustable to suit the needs of each individual application that comes through, and won't set the Shire up to handle as much risk as it does in the unfortunate and unlikely event that one of these industries goes over and leaves the rehabilitation to the local government to have to sort out, which I think is not only unfair on the Shire's resources, but it is unfair on the community and having to pick up that tab. So I think we've got a policy here which clearly outlines those matters and achieves a high level of protection for the environment, but in particular our groundwater resources, which are going to become more and more important into the future, as well as our primary agricultural zones, which, as we've seen from UN modelling, farms around the world are going to have to produce 3 times the amount of produce they are doing now by 2050 to feed the world. So that land is extremely valuable, and the Shire of Capel has made up a fair portion of it, so we need to make sure we keep that protected. Just a little bit further on it, yesterday the southwest zone of local governments got together in Bustleton, as we do bi-monthly, and there was certainly a bit of interest and discussion around this policy. Some other local governments have been watching it for some time. It's my hope that this will eventually become a bit of a regional standard, and we'll see some other local governments adopt it, hopefully, to try and get a clear and concise vision across the region, but also providing that surety to operators that, you know, they are still welcome to operate, but there's certainly going to be some standards around that. So I commend the policy to the council, and yeah, let's get some public notice out about this one. Councillor Towntroy.
Yes, well, this was a policy that the staff have worked really hard on, and the councillors have discussed to ad nauseum almost. I remember going on my first site visit and being very full of questions and wanting change. And it was after my first site visit that these changes started happening, and it happened almost overnight that we started working on these. And I was really, really happy about that, because I think that if the Southwest is going to be a food bowl, we need to look after the land. We need to prevent destructive things to the environment, and we need to protect the water source. So I agree. I mean, it's an opportunity for us to lead, us, a little shire, leading in policy with EILs, in extractive industry applications, and also having other councils, because other councils are watching what's happening right now and what we're doing, because we're the first. And so this is really nice for our shire. It's better than nice. I'm just over the moon about it. I'm just really happy. So yeah, by adopting this policy, hopefully other councils will see how it works for us, and we'll also adopt the policy as well. I think the biggest thing is that we've got larger bonds on extractive industries, so that if they don't rehabilitate to the standard that they have agreed to, that we can hold that bond and we can get the land back to a reasonable condition. So thank you. I implore my fellow councillors to vote for this. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to firstly congratulate you on your bit of a sermon there. Obviously, a very proud father. That's great. Look, I just want to reiterate that we, as a councillor group, this came to council. We had a lot of the industry operators ask us to maybe go away and think about things and consult further, and we did. And I remember vividly, there were quite a few councillors at the forum or online Teams meeting that we had with extractive industry, and sat there very interested, and we paid attention. I think we refined our policy a bit to make sure that extractive industries can continue, because we, like Mr. President said, they're a valued contributor to our local community in terms of growth and economic development and that sort of thing. But it's always going to be a fairly fine balance. So we went away, we consulted, we refined our policy, which is what has been presented today. And I think Councillor Towntroy is right in that we should be proud as a sort of moderately sized shire that we've come up with something that could well be a bit of a sort of industry standard. And I also would commend it to my fellow councillors. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? No. I think I've said all I need to say, so I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. Community and Corporate Reports, 15.1, the financial reports for the 30th of April 2023. Is there a mover for those financial statements? Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Andrew. Councillor Mogg. Is there any discussion on those statements? No, the mover has nothing to close. Nope. I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. 15.2, the accounts paid during the month of May 2023. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Dillon. Seconded, Councillor Mogg. Councillor Dillon.
Just as read, Mr. President. Thank you.
Councillor Mogg. Is there any discussion on those accounts? No. Councillor Dillon, anything to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.3, Walga Local Futures Convention 2023 and Annual General Meeting. Is there a mover? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor Terrantroy. Councillor Andrew. Yep. Did you have a proxy, or are you going to, or did you want to go to committee for that? All right. Is the seconder happy with that still? All right. Does the mover wish to talk to the item?
So, that we had a couple of councillors put their hand up, say that they wanted to attend, along with the Shire president. I landed on Councillor Cleary for a number of reasons. Given the date of the World Convention and the date of the Shire election.
Sorry, Councillor Andrew, can you please just turn on your microphone? Sorry.
Do you want me to start all over again? Perfect. I don't, given the date of the Welga Convention and the date of this year's elections, I don't believe that a councillor that is up for re-election or whose term is potentially ending 6 weeks after the Welga Convention should be going. I think that the convention, if it's going to be beneficial to the community, your attendance, you actually then need to be a councillor for longer than 4 or 6 weeks after the Welga Convention. And I also don't believe that councillors that went the previous year should go the following year. So Councillor McCleary was the one councillor that didn't tick either of those boxes. He's got another 2 years after October, and I believe that even with his prior term on council, I don't believe he's actually ever attended. So, yeah, I thought it was probably about time he got to go.
Councillor Terrantroy.
I'll reserve my right to speak.
All right. So we still need a point 2. So I'll move that we suspend Standing Order 10.1 to allow discussion on point 2. All right. Is there a seconder for that procedural motion? Councillor Andrew. All those in favour? Yep. Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that is carried. All right. So, we have a vacant position for the proxy. Who wants to go as a proxy? 2 nominations, Councillor Terentroy and Councillor Sciano. Are there any other nominations? Nope. All right. Since there's only one other position vacant, we'll need to go to a ballot for that. Doesn't really work like that, but we'll go to a ballot. So while that's prepared, I'll adjourn for...
Oh, you did one of
Do you want to? Or do we not?
We can make out clear.
Did you want to make please? All right. Hang on. I'm just not...
While we prepare the ballots.
I'm just thinking... Yeah, that'd be fine. All right. I'll,
As
Deputy President.
Yeah, I mean to fill the time while we prepare ballots. The Walga State Convention is I think, a very important event, probably the biggest event for elected officials in the annual calendar. And I last attended in 2018.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Just while I'm just... I'll appoint the Chief Executive Officer as returning officer as a voting per member. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to do that. So he was already doing it anyway, but sorry.
Yeah, and I very strongly agree with one of Councillor Andrew's points, because I think I've come back here almost every year since then and said there's a new lot of councillors, or I've been in 2018, then there's more new councillors, and I've been very clear that I've always wanted new councillors to have the opportunity to attend Walga conference before myself. And so I haven't re-nominated for those exact purposes. Admittedly, I was a guest of Walga to the actual convention component itself for a session. So I have returned back to the convention, but never on behalf of the Shire of Capel. I guess at the end of the day, until the polls close and they say it's no longer business as usual for myself, then it's business as usual for myself as a Shire councillor. So I'm very eager to go back. I remember getting a lot out of that. In fact, I was actually looking through some of the old documents and freebies and other tote bag full of things that I nabbed from the last convention. And I remember I did an on-site visit to Elizabeth Quay, actually, on nature play areas and the nature play space that had just been built there at that time. So you do remember a lot of things, but there's also another component to the convention that we often forget about, and that is setting the direction for the future as well for local government, because it's not just about it's as a councillor to go there. It is a huge body or group that we have such involvement in, and we pay fees as well, and we should be sending representatives to that to do those things. But yeah, ultimately, look, I am really eager to go. I'm not at all scared by the thought of October this year. For me, it is business as usual up until the moment it's not. So I would very much appreciate the opportunity to attend again after so many years, and having done what I thought was the right thing at the time and given other people the opportunity, I'd be looking for the opportunity this year.
Councillor Terentroy.
Yes, well, I would like the opportunity to attend the Walga conference as well. I got a lot out of it when I went on the first time. It's a really great networking opportunity to speak with other councillors from other areas. It's also a really great way to know what's actually happening in local government globally, because we can't possibly read everything that comes into our email, all the Walga documentation and stuff. I'm a very dedicated councillor. I completed all of my councillor training within a 6-week period when I first was elected in February. And yeah, I am very committed. I'm on many committees, and I would value the opportunity to attend with 2 of our male councillors and be the female one there. Thank you.
All right. right, so Councillor Noonan, if you could please text the Chief Executive Officer your vote. That way there is a written record of it. And also just to not put you on the spot to say out a name. So if you could please do that immediately. Other councillors in the chambers, you have received your ballot, you probably already filled it out. Just tick a box, it's not preferential. So it's still simple. Did you- Time to try out for Capel's. Next, Capel's Got Talent. Double check. When you're ready, Mr. Seow, would you please announce the result? Sorry. Would the council like the vote number or just the individual? Just a name.
Through you, Shire President, the vote has indicated in favour of number 2, Councillor Sciano, being nominated as the proxy.
All right. Does the mover and seconder concur with that being included in the recommendation? Yep. All right, I'll move that we reinstate standing orders. As it's on the board, the standing order part 10 debate of motions be resumed. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against reinstation? Yep, and that's carried unanimous. We now return to the substantive motion. So it now reads that 1, the Shire President and Councillor McCleary be nominated as the voting delegates for the WAUGA Annual General Meeting to be held on the 18th September 2023. 2, Councillor Sciano be nominated as a proxy in the event that either councillor referred to in point 1 above is unable or unwilling to vote. And 3, the voting delegates and proxies referred to in point 1 and 2 be authorised to attend the WAUGA Local Futures Convention, and all costs for travel, registration, accommodation and meals be paid in accordance with council policy, attendance at events. All right, are there any speakers for or against that item? No? Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against the item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. (15.4) Delegations Review. And as mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there is an updated officer's recommendation to include a point 3. Endorse new delegation 1.2.33 fauna release as presented in the late attachment 15.4.2. Is there a mover for that updated recommendation? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor Terrentroy. Councillor Andrew. Councillor Terrentroy. Are there any speakers for or against that item? No. Councillor Andrew. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan, can you please state whether you're for or against that item?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. New business of an urgent nature. Don't believe there's any. We now move to public question time. Are there any public questions? Yes. If you just come to the lectern, please, and state your name and locality for the record.
Thank you, Kyle Jackson, BCP, from Bustleton, but a landowner in Capel as well. More of a thank you than a question, if that's okay. Just wanted to acknowledge the councillors and CEO and tenure in relation to the extractive industry policy, that acknowledging that what was put up initially there were some industry concerns, that an industry forum was arranged. Several councillors came to that. I thought that was a really constructive meeting, and overall I think the council's got a pretty balanced, fair policy. So a couple of little tweaks, but overall I think you've done a great job. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I know you get a lot of people probably coming here and complaining about things, but you've done it. I think you've done a good job. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Are there any public questions? No. We'll move on to motions without notice. There are none. Are there any notices of motions for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of the council? No. There are no items for consideration behind closed doors, and there being no further business on tonight's agenda, I'll declare the meeting closed at 7:21 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance. Have a good night.